Hi everybody. So yesterday I filmed a film review of a new film that's just come out called The Zone of Interest, which is about, as you can see in this trailer, a Nazi family, the Höss family, living next door to Auschwitz. Höss oversaw the running of the camp, and it's about how evil manifests and how they were totally comfortable with what they were doing, and you just basically never actually go inside the camps. That's her trying on, his wife trying on a Jewish coat that was seized and stolen from a Jewish woman that presumably went to her death. And the film is about dehumanization, about how they were totally at ease with what they did, and you sort of see just them living their day-to-day lives while the greatest crime committed in human history was taking place that they were a part of right next to them. And I wanted to just talk about how I thought the film was really, really powerful, and I spoke all about the various aspects of the film and the lessons to learn from it. And I want to show you what I said, and I'm going to put that at the end of this video. But as I was getting ready to post it, I saw what happened at the Oscars, where the director collected an award that was won for the film. And I'm just going to show you what he said, because it is frankly completely outrageous. Have a listen.
Our film shows where dehumanization leads at its worst. It shaped all of our past and present. Right now, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people. Whether the victims of October the 7th in Israel, or the ongoing attack on Gaza, all are victims of this dehumanization. How do we resist?
I have to tell you, I was so shocked to see him say this, but then again, at the same time, I was also not shocked, because there has been a concerted effort for many decades now to try and Nazify Israel. But you know what the great irony is? The great irony is that he has created a film about how we can turn a blind eye to demonization, to dehumanization. In this case of the film, towards Jews. And he is saying, and the lesson therefore is that we shouldn't, do that same thing with regard to what's happening to the Arabs in Gaza, and that Israel is in some way guilty of those same moral sins. The great irony is that actually he has shown that he is guilty of the very thing that his film has come to decry. That's the greatest irony of all. He thinks he's being clever, he's being pious by saying, just as the Nazis dehumanized the Jews, so too I won't stand by and dehumanize the Arabs, the Palestinians. Oh boy. See, what's happened is, over many decades, there's been a concerted campaign by the Palestinian leadership, both past and present, to create a movement, an identity, and a freedom struggle, not because they genuinely want national self-determination. It has been from beginning till end about getting rid of the Jewish state. The Arab leaders, both past and present, have said that creating this Palestinian national identity and the flag and this language of Palestinian is just a ploy to get rid of Israel. They see themselves as part of southern Syria. They'd be happy to be part of an Islamic empire. They see themselves as just Arabs. They want Arab unity. And the issue for them is not about the fact that they've been taken over. No. There was no stealing of land. Israel did everything according to international law, and as I say, historically they had the right to be there. But the displacement that occurred, these occupations and the checkpoints and the blockades have all happened in response to Israel being attacked by people who do not have a national agenda. They simply cannot tolerate any Jewish state, even on the tiniest sliver of land. They've got all these Arab and Muslim states in the region covering so many more miles of land, but they don't care about that. The issue for them is having one tiny Jewish state, because it ruins their entire philosophy of Islamic domination, basically. And what they do is cleverly hide themselves in virtue, and they created this whole movement to justify their evil plan to try and wipe Israel off the map. And people like Glazer have fallen for it. They've fallen for their modern dehumanization tactic of the Jews, just as the Nazis use their other tactics. And the Jewish state is the rightful home of the Jewish people, the historic home, and also was the catalyst for it was the Holocaust. And the importance of it, apart from it being our national home, historically, in terms of indigeneity, in terms of, you want to look at it religiously as well, through every angle, but even if not through those angles, a great and powerful case for Israel is that it gives Jewish people self-determination and ability to have some control over their fate and their destiny, having spent 2,000 years being persecuted and more recently put into ovens. His film is about how people shrug their shoulders at Jew hatred, they turn the other cheek, they look the other way, and find arguments to be comfortable with demonizing the Jews. And by talking about the occupation, or the operation in Gaza, which is a security operation, it's a police operation, it's an operation to get rid of the modern day Nazis, the Hamas terrorists, who are not interested in freedom struggles. This is not about freedom for them. I don't know Jews who walked out of the concentration camps and went to rape, behead, and kidnap and mutilate and burn babies, women, and civilians, or even Nazis for that matter. It is so sickening how he can make this moral equivalence and talk about the occupation. Israel was not occupying Gaza, and Judea and Samaria, and all the issues going on there, whether you want to talk about security checkpoints and blockades to control weapons going in, everything Israel's doing is simply for survival. And if you can't understand, as he can't seem to understand, that what Israel's doing is not because we enjoy it, not because we like to see people suffering and hurting and in pain, but because we have to do it for our very survival, and it's the moral thing to do, and we're facing an ideology which is exterminationist. What he's doing is jumping on their bandwagon, falling into their tactics, which is to try and shame Israel, to try and cloak themselves in virtue that we're really freedom fighters. And yes, he condemns the Hamas attacks, but by condemning what Israel is doing in response, you're giving succor to what they're doing, to the whole cause, which is simply trying to annihilate Israel. So actually, the great irony is that this man who made a film to decry the dehumanization of the Jews is guilty of that very same thing, because he's playing into the narrative, which is about trying to take away the Jewish people's self-determination and ability to have some kind of say over their national fate and restoration to their rightful homeland. It is so sad, and I'm still going to show you what I said, my review that I filmed before I saw this Oscar speech, because we can still learn the right lessons. I would also add, by the way, and I can say this, we can't say this enough, we are not happy about the fact that there are sufferings going on the other side. But we know our people are still suffering. We have 100 plus hostages in Gaza, and we know we have a moral duty to go in there and fight and win this war and fight our enemies, just as we did in World War II. And if you can't understand that, if you can't understand that we don't like it, but it's necessary, then you need to go back to kindergarten, because it's like they have a kindergarten moral code that they can't think beyond the most basic level of moral understanding and analysis. So I'm going to show you my review because we can still learn the right lessons. The world is trying to push us once again towards dehumanizing the Jewish people's state, their nation state, the Jew among the nations. And in so doing, just as the Nazis did, create justification for persecution or worse. As I say, he has clearly learned nothing from the film and the messages of the film. And it's a sign of just how successful this campaign has been on the side of those trying to wipe out Israel. Because they have successfully, for many people, in many people's minds, demonized Israel to the point at which you can justify being completely opposed to whatever Israel does for basic self-defense. We must continue to not be swayed by that and we must continue to not allow this dehumanization and this apathy towards Jewish suffering continue. We must be strong, we must be steadfast, and must keep sharing this knowledge and the truth to as many people as are prepared to listen. I think that's going to be one of the big lessons from this film. The world is once again dehumanizing the Jewish people, and we know all too well that they're not ignoring the pain of Palestinians, neither Jews nor those the rest of the world who aren't interested in Israel. That's all that they want to talk about, when there are so many other conflicts in the world that are far more deadly, far more, with far higher civilian casualties and levels of oppression and starvation and displacement. But no, so it's really nothing to do with the dehumanization of the Arabs in Gaza. It is about the dehumanization of the Jewish people's national home. Have a watch of the review and then leave your comments at the end. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about everything that's happened over the past few days. Hi everybody. So I recently went to see a new film that's just come out called The Zone of Interest, which is about a Nazi family that lived next door to Auschwitz, and were the father, Hess, was involved in overseeing what was happening in Auschwitz during the war, the extermination of the Jews. But what you'll see here, as you can see in this trailer, its entire focus is on just his family life. As you can see, he's next to the camps and the barracks and the chimneys, and all you see is just focusing on the family life and his work life and petty family arguments and growing vegetables in the garden right next to the camps, and him and his arguments with his wife, and his wife trying on jackets that were taken away from Jews. And I have to say that I really thought it was very, very powerful. It's not a typical Holocaust film, and for those who say, well, it's not showing the crimes that they did, you should be showing that, there are films that do that, is what I would say. There are films that do that. That's not what this film is. This film is a case study in evil and how evil manifests. And it was a particular way of understanding, a particular aspect of understanding the Nazi and the Nazi mindset. For them, they were so accustomed, so almost apathetic morally to the extermination of the Jews that they were doing, that you see that for them it's like they shrug their shoulders. They're much more concerned about all their petty daily life matters, about what's for dinner and his next job transfer. And you literally see them having arguments right next to the chimneys, and people, Jews walking past, and you're hearing gunshots in the background. It's the banality of evil. It's the fact that the Nazis were so clinical, and they almost treated it like it was the most, there's nothing to see here. This is just our job, just following orders. And I think it's really helpful, because sometimes we portray evil, or we think of evil as being this, it would look like this monstrous, crazy, scary, very, very obvious kind of caricature. But actually, evil can not always be easy to spot, or it can hide itself in normality. And I think that's a really helpful lesson for all of us, to realize that people who may look normal and may have nice suits and ties, like, let's say, the Hamas leaders who are being interviewed and others, they can actually, evil can look very, very normal. And I think that's a really important lesson. But also what's really important is the way people get to evil is by creating in their minds intellectual justifications for what they're doing. And so once they can make these justifications that the Jews are really rats, that they're really scum, then they can go about their day, go about their daily lives. And the one thing that I actually take home for me personally is that all of us have, well, most of us are battling with some level, at least on a relative level, of good and bad. The empath within us and the narcissist within us, or the more selfish within us, selfish kind of tendency within us. And I think a lot of us on some level, I thought as well, because this is ultimately looking at the human mind, a lot of us can on some level, and it's sort of causal relative, I'm not saying that we're Nazis, but we can on some level maybe justify in our heads suffering, or numb ourselves to it, or let's say dampen that voice of empathy, or make ourselves okay with certain things that we should not be okay with, or something that we should be doing something about. And I'm not even talking about on a universal level. I mean, even saying, let's say, just in our own lives, in our own immediate circles of family, friends, and others, that we all have this capacity to not step up to the plate morally by shutting those voices down and becoming apathetic, or even worse, justifying things. So for me, this was a fascinating psychological case study, a case study in evil and what leads people down that path. And while I think it helps us to learn how to identify evil, to be a bit more discerning, there's also a personal lesson that I felt as well, which is that we all on some level have a capacity for moral apathy. Anyway, there's lots to talk about with regards to this film, and much more to be said, but I think if you're able to, give it a watch. As I say, you don't see you don't see directly the oppression and the extermination of the Jews in this film. And there's no great, brilliant plotline here. Really, this is a psychological case study. But if you're able to, check it out, because I think it's important. It's called The Zone of Interest. I'm Ollie Annisfeld, and you're watching JTV.